Dr. Caroline Crawford is the public astronomer at the Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge. Tell us more about this work.
Well, they've used radar signals from the satellite in orbit around Mars to bounce signals at the surface. And when they analyse those signals, looking at how long they take to be reflected back to the spacecraft and how much the signal's being diminished by the reflection, it tells you something about material that's doing the reflecting. And from analysing these, as you've just heard, they discovered a very bright reflection that looks like it's a lake of liquid water. This is like 1.5 kilometres down underneath the south pole of Mars. So it's under lots of layers of ice and dust, and it's deep below the surface.
How confident can they be about that conclusion?
Well, you're analysing the way the radar is reflected, and you're using other information, you know, about the chemical composition and the temperature profile, you know, how the temperature drops underneath the ground. And it's all these things combined. And this is the best interpretation. There are still going to have to be more checks done, more analyses of the data, and looking, I assume, for other similar signals to see whether this is just a one-off signal or whether this is part of a more widespread distribution of potential reservoirs of water deep underneath the Martian surface.
I wonder what it could be.
Well, yes, I mean, it could be some water-rich deposit, so, you know, not an actual lake, but some kind of layer that contains a lot of liquid water. So you've got slightly different variations, but their best interpretation of the data with all the information they have to hand is that it could be this lake up to 20 kilometres wide and at least perhaps a metre in depth, probably more.
How much more work will they have to do to be certain?
Well, you could only really be certain if you went there, and we're many decades from that. Current and planned rovers are just sort of scratching around the surface of Mars.
Because they'd have to drill down.
They'd have to drill.
Distance.
Yes, and it's technologically very challenging. First, to get a big enough probe to land at the south pole of Mars, and then to be able to drill 1.5 kilometres down beneath the surface. So actual direct detection of this water by being there, by robotically pulling it out, or a sample core from, is a long way off. So at the minute, we're going to have to rely probably just from signals like this from orbit. We're getting increasingly sophisticated in our interpretation of the data, and also relating it to what we know about, you know, subsurface water on the Earth, and doing comparisons like that.
What's heading to Mars next?
Well, currently there's half a mission that's there. There's another European Space Agency, Russian, is an orbiter and a lander combined called ExoMars. Some of that's already gone, the rest is going, we hope, in 2020. And there's an American mission called 2020. But both of these are, again, going to be rovers, where they're crawling around the surface, they're looking at the rocks, the minerals, they're looking for signs that there could have been conditions or perhaps ancient microbial life from the Mars, but they're perhaps only penetrating, perhaps, you know, what you can do by a drill or something down up to like 2 meters down below the surface. So that's a very different kind of environment from the one we're talking about at this potential lake. Oh.
It's going to take humans, isn't it?
Not necessarily. I reckon we could do quite a lot with robots, and it would be a lot safer.
How excited are you about this? We heard from the Italian Space Agency, they say this is clearly exciting.
It is clearly exciting because this, if it is confirmed, it will be the first liquid water we found on Mars. And the current thinking is that there isn't any liquid water on Mars. The surface temperature is too cold, the air pressure is so incredibly low. The water is expected to be either completely frozen, locked down deep underground, or in the air as water vapor. So the idea that underneath all the weight of this ice at the South Pole, that maybe you can compress the water enough that it is liquid, and it's probably quite salty, which also lowers the melting point. And so that perhaps you've just got this confluence of conditions that allows you to have these substances.
And the question of life.
And the question of life, because water, of course, and the water history of Mars is tied to this fundamental question about whether life ever existed on Mars. And, obviously not sort of liquid green Martians. We're talking about tiny bacteria, tiny organisms that could survive these extreme conditions for a long time. We know on Earth there are things called extremophiles that can live subsurface, deeply salty water. So potentially it's the first step in finding out whether such organisms could have existed on Mars, either in the past, or, if you did want to get really excited, even still to the present day.
And of course, this news comes as next week. Mars will come closer to Earth than it has been in about 50 brighter in the sky? Not so close that we can see the water.
No, it's not going to be. It's not going to be so close that it's going to look very different. Except it's going to be a lot brighter. I mean, Mars is small, so if it gets bright, it means it's near. So on Friday evening, it's the closest it's been to Earth for quite a long while, as you say, about 15 years or so. And it won't get this close again. And when I say close, we're still talking about 58 million kilometres. It's not exactly nearby, but it's, you know, close for us. And it just means that at the minute, if you go out at night, spectacular, after about 10:30 p.m., bright orange dots in the sky, one of the brightest things around.
Thank you for doing all of that for us, Dr. Carolyn Crawford, Public Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge. 5:21. Now, the latest on the fires in Greece, reporting again tonight, live from Mati, James Reynolds.
Thanks, Eddie. More than 100 people were injured in the wildfires on Monday, and they include Susan Margaret Steffos from the UK. She spent 50 years in Greece, where she's a warden at an Anglican church. On Monday, she was with her dog Maya at her home on the coast when the fires approached. She barely managed to escape, and she's now been treated in hospital in Athens for burns and smoke inhalation. She's been given an oxygen mask, which makes it hard for her to talk. But she wanted to tell me her story. So, with help, we worked out a way of communicating. I would ask questions, and her son Dimitros, standing next, would answer on her behalf.
We called her, she asked, do I leave the house? So we said, okay, pack your things up, and it's time to leave. But the thing is, up in Rafila, for the fire to get to our place, it's very, very difficult. We've lived a lot of fires in Utah, but never ever it's went so down. So my mother started to pack the things up. In 5 minutes the fire was at the house. And when the first fire, the big one, passed the house, she opened the door and left. She went down to the car was on fire, and she tried to run away, run to Marathonus. The bad thing about that is she had Maya with her. Maya is her dog, but Maya got terrified and went the other way. So she just ran through the fire. The place where we lived had a rama.
Like a river.
Like a river next to the house, and everything was burning. At the end, she got down to Marathonus and stayed there with two firemen. The fire started about 6 o'clock, half 6. She stayed there till half 10, a quarter to 11.
Susan wanted to do more than just listen and nod in this conversation. She took hold of a pad of paper and a green pen and nodded at me to continue asking questions. I pointed to the burns on her right arm, sustained where sparks hit her during her escape. I said that it might be too painful for her to write. She shrugged, suggesting that the injury wouldn't put her off. I asked her what it felt like to have survived. She wrote firmly in green pen, "I'm very grateful, especially as so many people died. Will you return to her?" She immediately picked up the pen. "I'm 71, she wrote, and she added an exclamation mark. She felt strong enough to pull away her oxygen mask and voice a few words of her own.
When I was in the house, the fire was going over. I thought, I'm not going to make it. This is the end. But prayers were asked. And I managed.
Susan Margaret Steffos expects to be able to return to her busy life, but others will take much longer to recover. This country is still trying to count and identify its dead. The authorities say that more than 70 people are known to have died, but they don't know for sure how many more bodies they may find.
James Reynolds. All of all countries around the world are trying to control the amount of plastics they produce and use. In Kenya, for example, they banned the manufacture, sale and use of polythene bags, according to PM and Soy.
I've come to Bama Market in Nairobi. It's a busy meat market. I can see small shops on both sides of the road, most of them selling meat. And outside many of these shops, I can see rolls of aluminium foil as well as recycled paper. Just last year, this market was using tons and tons of plastic bags, but not anymore. The transition was not easy. In fact, at one point in February, the Environment Management Authority shut down this market because they failed to comply with the ban. But now it's back in operation. I'm going to speak to some of the traders to ask them how they are coping with the ban.
About said we are affected. They have not what we are supposed to use by.
What do you think about the ban?
The environment is cleaner. Then we are using those plastic papers.
So do you support it?
We support. They bring the solution now.
You need alternative. One person who is providing alternatives for traders like Jane is Marcos Guitar.
These are waste from the company. These are papers. They are allowed to use.
Manufacturers are still allowed to use plastic bags. Yes, to products in the factory.
Primary company is allowed at the moment for the time being. I buy the waste, then I come and sell it to the customer.
Marcos tells me he used to sell tens of tons of plastic bags a month before the ban. But now, with the waste wrappers from factories, he gets just 1 ton if he is lucky.
Even though it has my business, I support it. The environment now is a little bit cleaner and we're going to the right direction. I support the ban.
Kenya is the latest country in Africa to impose a ban on plastic bags after Rwanda, Morocco, among others.
This is an issue that is as much made by developing as by developed countries. The European Union and the United Kingdom has been in the lead, but so has Kenya and Rwanda, so is India.
Eric Sholan is the global head of the United Nations Environment Program.
We have the plastic at the very bottom of the floor of the Pacific Ocean, in the Arctic, when no one is living in the Pacific Ocean, where we're thousands of kilometers from anyone, there are huge islands of plastic. So this is a huge issue. It's killing elephants in India, whales in Norway, seals, sea turtles, cod, fishes all over the world. And at the end of the day, a small piece of plastic will end up also in our body through drinking water or through eating fish.
If nothing is done about plastic pollution, what's the worst case scenario?
Well, then it's a plastic Armageddon. We will have oceans full of plastic, national parks full of plastic, cities full of plastic. We can foresee a situation by 2050 where there is more weight of plastic in the oceans than the weight of fish. Divers diving down, see plastic everywhere on the surface of the plastic. So there is no doubt that we need to change. But the good news is that I'm also in no doubt that we will change.
More than 100 countries around the world have taken steps to reduce dependence on polythene carrier bags. But it's not easy for most people to change their habits and forego the convenience plastics offer. Like in Nairobi's Bama market, there is need to provide practical alternatives.
And so I reported for PM from Kenya. I'm Michael Burke with news of this week's Bottle Made.
Hi. Pythons are extinct, and that's official. For 50 years, I've been watching the worldwide hit comedy Monty Python's Flying Circus. The BBC's comedy commissioner has said never again will they put together a team of 6 Oxbridge white blokes. Diversity is the moral imperative of new age in time.